Good evening, my Torah audience, all of you, each and every one of you, special, unique, as we learn Torah l'shem shamayim, to be mekadesh shem shamayim, and to be able to present and give a nachas ruach, hopefully, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This Shabbos is going to be Parshas Balak, and Friday is Tes Vav Tammuz, which is the yahrzeit of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. Now, he was one, as I've said to you in the past, one of the very few by Klal Yisrael that the entire Klal Yisrael crowned him with the title Kadosh, and there were only very few from all the Tanoim. You have only Rabbeinu HaKadosh. They were all tzaddikim. They were all able to resurrect the dead. He was able to go into a cemetery and tell everyone to stand up. But the only one who got the title by Klal Yisrael universally was Rabbeinu HaKadosh. And you have the Alshech HaKadosh and the Shloh HaKadosh, Rashi HaKadosh. So there are very, very few, and the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. Now we see how big he was because he lived for 2.5 years in Eretz Israel, and he was a wealthy man, and every Thursday he gave out meat to the Aniyim, to the Talmidei Chachomim, who didn't have the money to go buy meat, flesh, lekoved Shabbos, and he would give them. So the story goes, and Rav Zevin brings it, that the Or HaChaim HaKadosh was asked one Thursday by a Talmud Chacham for some meat. And he answered and said, I've given out the entire bag that I brought. So-and-so just came, and I gave him the last piece of meat. So the person responded to the Or HaChaim HaKadosh and said, so-and-so, oichet mir a Talmud Chacham, also considers himself a Talmud Chacham. And the Or HaChaim HaKadosh did not respond. He didn't say anything. So there was a gezerah at that moment in Shamayim that he had to go into Golus. And he accepted it. And Golus means you don't say who you are, and you're a vagabond. You're just basically going from shul to shul. You're sleeping half the time in the shul. And the very first week that he went, he came to a village, and there was a very prominent Rov, a Sephardic Rov. And the story goes that it was Parshas Bechukosai, and the Or HaChaim HaKadosh took a seat in the back of the room. Nobody knew who he was. And the Rav in that shul said a drasha Friday night during davening, Shabbos morning during davening, and then at Shalosh Shudas in the afternoon, 3 times. So Friday night when he went up to speak, he said they were megalit to him from Shamayim. A few moments earlier, 14 of the 42 pshatim that the Or HaChaim HaKadosh says on this parsha, Parshas Bechukosai. And he said the 14 items. And from the back of the room, the Or Chaim HaKadosh, who no one knew it was him, that he calls out and says, Emes, it's true what the Rav just said in quoting the Or Chaim HaKadosh, Kach Omar Chaim ben Atar. That was the Or Chaim HaKadosh's name. But to say Chaim ben Atar, he wasn't a 6-year-old child. He didn't say Morenu v'Rabbeinu Harav or Hagaon or HaKadosh. Just Kach Omer Chaim ben Atar. And the people wanted to get up and to throw him out, that he was speaking so chutzpahdik about the Or Chaim HaKadosh. They didn't know that he was the Or Chaim HaKadosh. So, as the story is told, that the Rav said, no, chas v'shalom, maybe this is a simple guy, and he doesn't know how to properly address. So don't do anything to him, leave him. But explain to him that the Or Chaim HaKadosh is a Kadosh and a Tzaddik, and when you refer to him, we give all the titles and all the kavod to him. And that was it. Shabbos morning, when the Rav got up, because the Or Chaim HaKadosh says 42, so if you say 3 times on Shabbos a drush and you quote, it's 14 each time. So Friday night he said the first 14, and then Shabbos morning he said the second 14 again. And the Or Chaim HaKadosh from the back calls out, Emes kach amar Chaim ben Atar. And now the people were starting to really get upset, because last night they thought maybe he didn't know, so they explained to him, and they had the patience to tell him of how to refer and how to speak. But now he did it again. So they really wanted to throw him out, but the Rav stepped in and said it could be he didn't understand what you were telling him. So get someone to say it in 2 or 3 different languages to make sure he understands. But when it came Shalashudas, and the Rav said the last and final 14 pshatim, and again he called out from the back of the room, Emes kach omer Chaim ben Atar. They grabbed him and they threw him into the town jail. Now, every single week, Motzoi Shabbos, there is a tzaddik in the world that says Havdalah, and the world is renewed and continue for the next week. But here they threw, and that tzaddik was the Or Chaim HaKadosh, who used to say it every week, Havdalah, and had in mind, and even in his Pirush, you could see that he writes, HaMachadesh betuvo b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reishis, that the schus of the upcoming week existence is because the tzaddik of the generation says Havdalah and knows what to be mechaven, that the world should exist for another week until the next Havdalah. But here the Or Chaim HaKadosh was thrown into jail, so he couldn't make Havdalah. And there was a terrible storm outside, and it was a flood scene. And the Rav, who obviously had Ruach HaKodesh, or had tremendous koiches, he went to sleep, and in his dream saw that in every city in the world there was such a drenched rain going on in each and every, it wasn't just their city. It was because no one, the Tzaddik Hador, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, didn't make Havdalah. He was in jail, he didn't have the wine, he didn't have the candle, he didn't have the psumim. So, in the dream, they told this Rav that man that was sitting in the back of the shul and that your Kehillah threw him into jail, he's the Tzaddik Hador, he is the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, and he is the one who has to make Havdalah, otherwise the world is not going to be existing for this upcoming week. He jumped out of bed, and in the flooding streets and the mud and everything, he found his way to some of the Kehillah and said, we did a terrible thing, let's run to the jail and let him out, let him make Havdalah, the rain will stop, and we have to ask him Mechila. And Min HaShamayim, they told the Orach Chaim HaKadosh that with the bizyonis of what they did to him, that he doesn't have to be in Golus anymore. So they came, they begged Mechila, and they gave him the things to make Havdalah, and the rain and the flooding subsided. So you see how big the Orach Chaim HaKadosh was, and when Rommel, Yamach Shemo V'Zichro, the fox they used to call him, he was like the tremendous general he had for Hitler. He had tremendous ability as a general to conquer, and he wanted to run on Yerushalayim and Eretz Yisrael and conquer it. Reb Shlomka of Zvil, together with the Hoshaten Rebbe, went to Har HaZeisem with 20,000 people. This was in the middle of the Second World War, and Rommel made it to Egypt, and he was going to cross over, and there was going to be a massacre. So Klal Yisrael was really very afraid, and led by Reb Shlomka Zvil, who was the biggest of the biggest of the biggest, and obviously the Hoshaten Rebbe was a tremendous, they took everyone to daven by the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. And while they were davening there, the Hoshaten said, we have solved the problem, because I just saw on top of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh's kever, in fire, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Shem Havaya. And that's the name of Chesed. And that means that our tefillahs were niskabel. And at that moment, there was a sand storm, if I am correct. But he never made it into Eretz Yisrael. That is a fact. And it was because of these tzaddikim and these 20,000 Yidden who went up to Or HaChaim's kever on Har HaZeisim that they accomplished what they had to accomplish, and that Klal Yisrael was saved. So we see how big the Or HaChaim Zechusa Yogin Aleinu. Now the Talmidim of the Apter Rav, and the Apter Rav was known as the Oyev Yisrael, and his Sefer is called the Oyev Yisrael. And he had tremendous Ahavas Israel. And he once said to the Talmidim that Ahavas Israel you can find in some of the words expressed through a remez, a hint, in every parsha of the Torah. So when it came to Balak and he said it, our Sedra of this week, they said, Rebbe, how do you see, you say that the name Balak is Ahavas Israel. How do you see that? So the Aptarov answered and said, Balak is spelled Bais Lamed Kuf, and that stands for V'ahavta l'reyacha kamocha. So the Talmidim said to him, Rebbe, V'ahavta is with a vav, and Balak, the Bais, is not a vav, it's a Bais. Okay, the second letter in Balak, that's l'reyacha, that fits in. But kamocha in the kuf of Balak is not there at all, because a kuf is not a chaf, and kamocha is a chaf. So how in the world do you, how in the world are you saying that V'ahavta l'reyacha kamocha is in the name Balak, Beis Lamed Kuf? So the Aptarov said, because if you have real Ahavas Israel, you cannot be medaktek in the oisius. Which means simply he was telling them, you're right, a Beis is not a Vav and a Kuf is not a Chaf. But what his message was, that when we deal with Klal Yisrael, if the Ahavas Yisrael is bishleimus, that it is intact and in perfect format, then we don't pick on the details of each and every yid. Just like we're not going to pick on the details of the name Balak, because it's a Beis and it's not a Vav. And that's how we have to treat Yidden, that regardless of their shortcomings or their statements or their expressions, that we love them just the same. Now, we know in our Sedra that the purpose was that Balak commissioned and wanted Bilaam to come. The Gemara says that Moshe Rabbeinu was the biggest Navi who ever lived, but the Gemara says that was by Klal Yisrael. But by the Umos Ha'olam, by the Goyim, there was a Navi as big. True, it was Mitzad Tumah. It was not Mitzad Kedusha. But in the Nevi'as, he had the same ability as Moshe Rabbeinu. Even though it was not Mitzad Kedusha, but it was Mitzad Tumah. Now, so he was commissioned to curse Klal Yisrael. But the messengers of Balak came to Bilaam, and Bilaam answered them and said, listen, you stay overnight, and I'll see what messages are sent to me by dream, what I should do, what I should not do. And in the morning, and in the dream, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, don't go with them. Don't go with them. And when he got up in the morning, he said, I have to do what message I got from heaven. And the message was not to go with you. And they left. But they came back the next day. Excuse me. They came back the next day, and at the end of the conversation, Bilaam said, yeah, I'm coming with you. What happened that the first day he flatly refused and was told from heaven not to go, and now suddenly he was more than willing to go? And the answer, and the Chassam Sofer and others talk about this, and the Medrash talks about it. 2 items. The first thing is that when they came the first day, they did not promise any benefit. Not covet, not the honor, not money, not the financial gain. And when somebody goes on a mission without any ulterior motive, he can succeed. Once there is something that he is offered, and the first time they didn't offer him anything, but when they went back and told Balak, he doesn't want to come. So Balak sent a message, I'll give you a house full of gold and silver, oh. Now he's going to have some gain and he's thirsty for the reward. Now he can go. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no problem. Because you have such negiyas and you are so tainted in the purity of your mission that it's not going to succeed anyway. Because you're thinking about the money and the silver and the gold. So when we undertake to do something, now if someone does a mitzvah and it's only to show off or to have people say, oh, look at that guy, what he does, what a tzaddik or what a wonderful person, the mitzvah remains a mitzvah and he gets schar for it. But the polish and the luster of that mitzvah has been tainted and is dimmed as it goes up to heaven as a schus for the person. So Bilaam now was given permission to go, no problem. Once you're dreaming about the money, you'll never succeed. And the Meforshim ask, in the Pasuk it says, that Bilaam said, you know, I am directed by heaven. And even if Balak wants to give me Melo Beso, the full gold and the full art and the full everything of his house, I cannot defy the word of heaven when I'm told yes or no. So the Meforshim are very quick to pick up, why did he say, even if Balak gave me all the riches of his house, just say, if he gives me a house full of gold or full of diamonds or full of silver, I can't deviate from what I'm being told. But the answer the Meforshim say is because Bilaam, once he opened up his mouth and started to talk about the benefit, the richness of all the gold and silver, he said, I'm not just interested in a house full of gold and silver. I want Melo Beso. I want everything that he has in his house. You see, there's somebody who could be driving down the street in a brand new Rolls Royce. Lavdil. And he's hoping every person that he's passing by takes note of his Rolls Royce. But if right behind him is driving someone else with a Rolls Royce, it will dim the thrust of his happiness to show off the Rolls Royce. because he's not the only one. There's a guy right behind him with a Rolls Royce. Bilaam was so decadent in his behavior that it even reflected in the fact if you gave somebody and he won the lottery and he's getting $150 million, the fact that in a different town someone won a lottery, it doesn't bother him as long as he has the money. Bilaam, instead of just being happy that he was now being promised a household of everything, Bilaam said, no, I want his house. I don't want to have the competition of someone else being as rich as I am. If I get the house filled with gold and silver and everything else. And that is the reason why the pasuk says, Malo Beso, says the Medrash, because he wanted his, not only that he should become the richest, but that he shouldn't have it. And that shows you the bad, rotten, spoiled midos. And we have to be very careful in tempering the items that we have, don't have, that when a neighbor, something good happens to him and they made a lot of money, whatever happens, not to allow the inner jealousy to pick up its head, its ugly head. And that's why you will see the difference when there's 20 girls in a class and one girl becomes a kala. So they're all kissing her and dancing with her. But there's somebody that may go home that night and cry, why did she become a kala? What's wrong with me? Why didn't I become the kala? Not forgetting the other person. Ugliness, which we have to work on ourselves to eradicate and demolish and diminish and totally eradicate that bad midah. Now, the Mishnah in Avos says that if someone has an ayin tova, a good eye, and a ruach nemucha, a humbled spirit, and v'nefesh shefela, and a very strong inner glow of humbleness, they're Talmidim of Avram Avinu. But the Mishnah in Avos says, but if somebody doesn't have it, and they have bad midos, then they're Talmidim of Bilaam, Harasha. So that is what we were just speaking about. That Talmidim of Avram Avinu will learn from Avram Avinu that when he went out to give the angels, the Malachim, to eat, he didn't just settle for what he had right there. The Medrash says that when he wanted to find a very juicy cattle, a cow, he ran as far, when he found, and the cattle started to run as far as Hebron, the Medrash says, he ran after it to catch it, to bring it back. Or he didn't find it according to Kabbalah, uven abakar asher asa, that he created on the spot. You know that Avram Avinu is the Mechaber and the one who wrote Sefer HaYetzirah, with the Moralmi Prague used to be able to create the Goyim. And the Goyim people were being shechted, Yidden were being slaughtered, men, women, children, and the Maral created this robot with the koiches of the Sefer HaYetzirah that Avram Avinu wrote about all the secrets of creation and how they were created. And he used to send out and instruct the robot to go to this and this town, and he was there like in 10 seconds. And wherever the shechita is taking place, he did the shechita of the goyim. He brought out the positivity and saved the lives of all of the Yidden. Now, Avram Avinu, he could have just had an iron, an iron raw or just an average iron. He found a cattle and shechted and gave it to them. And together with everything else, he gave the finest of flour. He gave to be able to really treat the guests the way we should treat a guest. And we should always remember that when the Mishnah in Sanhedrin says that here's a list of the people who are muchan mezuman to chaye olam haba. And then the Mishnah says, and these are the people who were never going to go to olam haba. And they don't have a chelek in olam haba. So the Meforshim ask, what about Micha? There was a Yid who was in Mitzrayim from Shevet Dan, who had a pesel, a little idol. And he used to, every day, when they lit the Ketores, make Ketores right for his idol and put it right next to the Mizbeach HaKetores, that in the column of Ketores going up for a Nachas Ruach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he used to put the Avodah Zorah Ketores, that column, to mix with the other one, the good with the bad. And the Medrash says that he wanted to, the Malachim wanted to kill him on the spot. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not let them. And he said, because he feeds the poor. And he goes out of his way and he adds on for anyone's taste buds that they want more, to get them more. And for that reason, as bad as he was, and he had that idol the whole time in the Midbar, and when they went into Eretz Yisrael, and he was still doing it when the Mishkan was in Shiloh for 369 years. And it's referred to as the Mishkan Shiloh because it was there so long. And he was still putting the Avodah Zorah Ketores next to the regular Ketores. And every day, says the Medrash and the Gemara, that they wanted to kill him and Hashem didn't let them. Why? Because he was feeding the poor. And that's why his name is not listed with those who do not get Olam Haba. Now, if you think for a moment, quietly, when you could concentrate on the depth of this mimer, I mean, he was ruining the Ketores. He was having the mixture of Avodah Zarah with the regular. Yet Hashem wouldn't let him be touched. Because feeding of the poor, and those of you out there who have at your Shabbos table an oirach or 2 or 3, and you're feeding, because sometimes people have food at home, but they never married, or they're divorced, or they're an almana, a widow, and they're sitting alone. So the food isn't the thing sometimes that they need. It's the company, it's the atmosphere. They're sitting alone. Loneliness is one of the worst things that can happen, lo aleinu, lo aleichem, to any human being. So we see the power of shining our sensitivity and polishing it to bring out the best in how we treat another Yid, how we feed him, how we seat him, how we offer him in the middle of a Suda, that we don't just pat ourselves on the back. Well, I got an oirach. Look at how many Yidden don't have an oirach sitting at their table. They're missing the boat. And I have. So look at how terrific I am. So Avram Avinu, Ayin Toiva, means just that. And that's the example that the Mefarshim give. When he went and even he found a beautiful cow to give them, he still wasn't satisfied. That's Ayin Tova. Because he could have just given them a regular, juicy, nice cow and shechted it. But he rather create a new cow from heaven, to fly down from heaven. And that's what the Mekubalim say, why he served milchiks and fleishiks, because once the fleishiks is a cow not naturally born, but flying down from heaven, it's not subject to the halachas of milk and meat. It's different, because it was not natural. And all the halachas are for natural situations in Olam Hazeh. So that is the beautiful example given of how far he went in his lifetime to always create a situation that was not just given an A, but an A+++ in what we do. Now, they once asked the Kotzker Rebbe, why is it that all of the Goyim, they have such gorgeous churches, they have such tremendous successes, and we, the Yidden, have little shtiblach that we put together and we struggle to keep it open and finance, to pay the electric and to whatever it is. So the Kotzker answered and said, because the Goyim, they serve the sheker, the falsehoods, with the emes, sincerely. And we Yidden, unfortunately, serve the emes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, his Torah, with the sheker. We're missing and lacking in our intention. Where are we coming from? How much personal praise and gain are we really looking for in the back of our minds while we're doing the mitzvah, and not having it rank with all of its rare and remarkable distinction and get the full benefit of Torah Lishma, or a mitzvah lishma, a nachas ruach to our Kodesh Baruch Hu. That was the Kotzker's answer. Now, the Medrash says that when Bilaam got up in the morning, and he had a lot of servants, it says, Vayachavosh es asono, that he himself loaded up the donkey. And the Medrash asks, he did it himself? I mean, he had all those servants. Why in the world wasn't he using the servants to get ready for his trip with the Sarei Balak? And they answer and say that his sinna and his hate for Yidden was so overwhelming that he didn't want to take even the 5 or 10 minutes to instruct his butler and his servant and everyone else what to do and what he wanted prepared for his trip. And for just a few minutes that it would have taken, he didn't want to even waste that. He wanted to be able to utilize immediately the time so he could get quicker and quicker to his place to curse and wipe out the Yidden. Now, we know that at the end of the second or third pasuk in our Sedra, it says, Uvolok ben Tzipor melech lemoav bo'es hahi. Mefarshim are wondering, what's his Bais Hahi? Could have just said he was the king in Moab. But the Mefarshim explained the reason that it says Bais Hahi is because he was really not the king. And he became the king when the people saw the level of how much he hated the Jews, the Yidden. And for that distinction of being so anti-Semitic, anti-Jew, anti-Yid, they made him king. Medrash says it. It's not my word, it's the Medrash. And that's why it says, Uvolok ben Tzipor melech lemoav bo'es hahi. Now, it shows us, and you know, you have an example right in front of you, this guy that the president describes as 100% communist. You see, the movement calls themselves socialist, but socialist is a lesser madrega than communism. Communism is much more brutal and terrible. And the president described him as 100% communist lunatic. And his hate for the Jews and the masquerading of the polished speeches is unbelievable. I mean, when you make a statement that you want every city in the world to have the global intifada, that means wipe out Jews worldwide. Exactly what it means. So does the polished charisma and speech really present such a dynamic that you should be impressed by? That's what Bilaam wanted. He couldn't wait to get there to start wiping out the Yidden. So the idea is that we cannot wipe out, and when they put these groups, they mean so well, but if it says that told the Geula Shlema we will be a despised and hated people, what's the reason? There is no reason. It's just ingrained in their DNA that no matter what we do and how we do, and that's why when I'm asked, when I'm on the radio, what is, I'll be asked, oh, Rabbi Balkany, we have another 2-3 minutes left. Do you have anything to share with the audience? And for the last 27 or 28 years, I say the same thing. I say to each and every yeshiva bacher, learn an extra page Gemara, learn a little bit more L'Shem Shamayim, not to come out that you killed them with your chabura. And it was so terrific that the people couldn't catch their breath. I mean, is that your kavana in giving that beautiful, or that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be sitting be there and smiling and kissing and hugging every single word, like it says in Zohar HaKadosh, that Shabbos, when a person sits at his table, and it's talking about the day Suda by day, and he's Machadash Chidushim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is kissing each and every word, putting a crown on it, and when the person is nifter, they pull out all those crowns. So I say to the Yeshiva Bachim, we're not going to win the war of anti-Semitism or Iran's nuclear desires or whatever's going on. Lo b'koyach v'lo b'chayv v'lo b'koyach ki em beruchi amar Hashem tzavakos. The mitzvah that you do while you're putting on tefillin, or the lady is preparing a package of fresh food for the lady down the block who needs the food or needs someone to help feed her the food or set up the table for the food, that all of these things are things which can add on to the schusim, and we always lived only by the schusim and by the siyata dishmaya, and by HaKadosh Baruch Hu favoring us because we are His people. So the Targum Yonason Ben Uziel says that the name Bilaam is spelled Beis Lamed Ayin Mem. And that the Targum Yonason Ben Uziel says that this Bilaam, in 4 different instances in his life, worked very hard to hurt and wipe out the Jews. The first place was Mitzrayim. Paro invited 3 people in, Eov, Yisro, and Bilaam. And he asked them a question: the Jews are becoming too many, too popular, they're going to devour us. What do you think we should do? And he asked these 3 for advice. And Bilaam said, you should start throwing the kids into the water, and you should start having them work, that from exhaustion alone they're going to drop and they're going to be eliminated. Yisro said, help them, they'll be the best thing for your economy. And he said, only good. And Eov shosak, he kept quiet. He didn't say bad and he didn't say good. Now, but Bilaam said bad, and this was Mitzrayim. And unfortunately, Paro took his advice over the others, the other 2. Now we find, and the Arizal says, and that was Bilaam, but the Arizal says that the soul of Lavan, Hoarami, to become, he was the father-in-law of Yaakov Avinu and the father of Rachel and Leah, that he was the neshama, the nefesh of Bilaam. And Lavan Bikesh La'akores Hakol. He wanted to wipe out everyone and everything. Lavan. Then you had Amalek, and it was Bilaam who went to Amalek to encourage them. Why don't you fight the Jews, the Yidden, Klal Yisrael, and wipe them out, that they will never be a problem for you? And they waged war. They lost the war. but they waged war. And the last one was Balak. And that spells his name. The Bais is Balak, Bilaam's name, Bais Lamed Ayin Mem. The Bais was Balak, the Lamed was Lavan, the Ayin is Amalek, and the last Mem is Mitzrayim. That he actively pushed the agenda to wipe out the Yidden. So says the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel. Now, at the end of the Sedra, when we see that he could not succeed, and that's what Shemayim said from the very beginning, once he was offered the gold and the silver, so Balak was very frustrated. And the Medrash says that Balak, the pasuk says, "Va'ata brach lecha el mekomecha," run home. You did not succeed. I brought you here to curse them, and you blessed them. So you run home. So they all ask, why did he say run home? Just tell him to go home. Go. You were not successful, goodbye. So the Medrash says that Bilaam was promised so much money, and he was counting on it, that while he was in Moab in this story with Balak, he was having the time of his life, and he took money from many people and drinking and partying and doing. So why? Because he was counting on the money he's going to get from Balak. But Balak said to him, oh, you didn't succeed, so I'm not giving you anything. And the people that you took money from are going to come running after you to kill you or to put you in prison. Who knows what they're going to do? So you better run with both feet. And barach lecha. That's what it says. The Mefarshim say why he said the lashon of barach, to run and to leave. And he did say to Balak, listen, I didn't succeed in cursing them, but I want to share with you that the most despised aspect of what someone could do is immorality. Hashem hates it. So bring in the women, they'll first serve Avodah Zorah, and then they're going to, they will then commit all of the sins with the women, and 24,000 people ended up dying because he took his advice, he did it, and indeed they were never so many thousands tripped on the bump in the road and the temptation, and they ended up dying out. So the question is that when this was going on from Shevet Shimon, there was someone called Zimri ben Solu and Kozbi Basur, and they committed an act in front of the whole Klal Yisrael. No busha, no. And the Medrash says that Zimri first walked up to Moshe Rabbeinu, because the question is this, why did Pinchas take the spear and kill both of them? Why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu or Elazar do something? So the Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu, when Zimri wanted to do this, he came up to Moshe Rabbeinu and said to him, am I allowed to live with Zimri ben Sol, with Cosby Basur? And he said, no. He said, so where was your heter to marry Tzipporah? She was also a goy. And Elazar married the daughter of Yisro, who was a kohen. Later he did tshuva, he became a yid, but his whole life he was an oived of Avodah Zarah, and his daughter was a goy. So if either of them would have been asked by Zimri, is he allowed to marry Cosby? And they would have said no, he would have asked them, so why did you marry who you? So there was a negios, tzaddikim said, that Moshe Rabbeinu, although it was 100% mutter, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu was very happy with it, but it was before Matan Torah, and he felt he had a negias because of the background, and so did Elazar. So Pinchas himself got up, and they asked, why wasn't he pasul al kohen if he killed someone? A kohen that kills someone becomes a cholol. He's like ois kohen. He doesn't get the first aliyah. He can't officiate at a pidyon haben. But the truth is that when Pinchas did this, he was not a kohen yet, because kahuna was given only to Aaron and his son, Elazar. And it was not meant to go. After Pinchas so nobly and bravely did what he did, in next week's Sedra and Pinchas, Hineni Nosein Loas Brisi Shalom, he will be, and his generations, V'hoya Solo Lazaro Acharav Beris Kahuna Soilam. He became a kohen, and all of his generations afterward inherited and became kohanim. So when he did this story with Cosby, with Zimri ben Solu, and killed him and her, she, he wasn't a kohen yet, so he couldn't have been pasuled and disqualified from being a kohen. We have to sharpen up on our intentions, our actions, and on our dibur. And we hope that the refinement will polish the level of schusim that we have, and that we should be able to be a tofeach al menas lahatfiach, bring out the best in others, that they too elevate themselves to bigger and better.